So a lot of people really don't like meetings. And as a new leader in engineering, you're about to be going to a lot more of them. And in addition to that, your role is going to shift. As an individual contributor in a meeting, you have a certain role and you're contributing information and helping move things along. As a leader in engineering, you're not only likely to be a facilitator, but people are looking to you as a role model. And so I really wanted to talk about 3 ways to grow your happiness in meetings as a leader, because I felt like that would have a big impact on helping you guys move forward and be successful. So this is a little bit about me. The right side of the slide, I had a super fun time putting this together last night. My early career started in the late 80s, and so there are no internet logos that I could depend on. So I made software that came in a box that you could mail away for at the back of MacWeek magazine. And my only souvenir is a bomber jacket. Isn't that weird? It used to be bomber jackets, not hoodies, like now it's hoodies. And then I was a co-founder of an internet company in the Web 1.0 era. So my management career spanned about 18 years as a VP of engineering and as a co-founder. And for the last 12 years, I've actually been an executive coach. And so I primarily work with vice presidents of engineering, CTOs, and CEOs. So for the last 12 years, I've spent almost every week having somewhere between 15 and 20 hour-long meetings with those leaders, talking about kind of all the puzzles in leadership. And those are the logos of some of the companies that I work with, including ShareThrough and actually Pivotal Labs, our 2 sponsors. So I put together my 3 tips going through my client notes that could create the most leverage for you in meetings. So we're going to talk about planning for success, about creating psychological safety, and about asking for feedback on facilitation. And in a way, these things all sound kind of simple, right? Like you can almost guess from this slide some of the things I'm going to talk to. But we're really going to take a deep dive on these things and give you both the grounding for why I would suggest those things, and then some very specific things that you can do. Okay, let's jump in. In terms of planning for success, often clients come to me now talking about meetings that they're concerned about, and they're concerned the meetings might get derailed or might be difficult, or they can't tell if people are actually getting what they want out of the meetings that they're hosting. And so these are the questions that I regularly ask clients about the meetings that they're planning to host. So the kind of lead question is, if this meeting is successful, what will the outcome be? Sounds kind of easy, right? But actually, if you think about it, some meetings are designed to create a specific outcome. They're designed to maybe create agreement or to share information. Sometimes meetings are about energy or camaraderie. But getting really clear about like what's the point of hosting this meeting helps you figure out kind of what comes next. So this whole piece of the talk is kind of the logistics part. Once you know what the successful outcome will be, you can ask yourself, will the right people be in the room? And those tend to be the people who are the stakeholders or the decision makers. And it's often not a lot of extra people. And so really going through and figuring out, like, who do I need to make a clear decision? Or who do I need to really back this plan? And making sure those people are invited and not a lot of extra people are. Then are the decision maker and the processes clear? Like, I'm stunned at the number of times that someone hosts a meeting about making a decision, but without saying who will make the decision. So if you can clarify for the attendees of your meeting, so is this a democratic process? Is this like one seat, one vote? Is this, I'm going to make a decision right here in this meeting? Is this someone else is going to make a decision off camera, but we're going to take all this feedback and input? And if so, by when, or using what heuristic or structure? So it can just be really helpful if the point of the meeting is about making a decision, to explain to people how that's going to happen so they know what they're participating in, they know what they're contributing to. This fourth item, should I talk to anyone beforehand? I call this kind of doing back channel work, and sometimes when I talk to clients about this, They go like, oh, politics, oh, I can't possibly talk to people beforehand. And my goal is not sort of like being super political and convincing everyone ahead of time. It's really to figure out, for the people who are going to be making this decision together, or for the people who are stakeholders, what are their pain points? What are their fears? What are the ways that you can talk about this issue that really resonate with them or make sense to them? And so can you present this issue, or can you present this challenge in the way that the majority of the attendees are really going to understand? And sometimes you do get agreement before the meeting, and honestly, that can really help kind of, move the process forward. And then finally, and this is another one of my favorite questions, if this meeting failed, right? If I walked out at the end of the hour or whatever going, oh, that was terrible, what do you think would have happened? Is it that someone was really difficult in the meeting? And if so, have a plan for how to deal with that. Is it that we didn't reach a conclusion and it feels like we wasted our time? Is it that it got derailed? And so just thinking ahead of time of what might not work, and what's my backup plan for handling that thing is likely to make your meetings go so much better. And so that's kind of what I have to say about logistics, about planning for success. And one final thing, and this is kind of controversial. Some of the speakers got together and practiced a couple days ago. And when I showed this, people were like, ooh, good and bad. A room full of engineers, the kind of fully loaded cost of having those engineers together for an hour, if there's 10 people in the room, it's about $1,000. So, just some information to use to figure out how many people need to be in this meeting. And it's not that all your meetings should be as tiny as possible, it's that the right people should be in the room. And I actually use it to gauge how much preparation should go into it, right? So when I knew I was talking to 150 plus people, that made me put a lot of preparation into those talks. And likewise, as a meeting facilitator, if you know you're hosting a meeting for 20 people, it's worth spending a good chunk of hours figuring out what you're going to present, how it's going to be clear, what's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I like to use that heuristic. And then finally, if you're using this to kind of trim down the number of people in a meeting, you'll sometimes get people saying oh, but I need to be in the room because I need to know what's going to happen. And I think one of the things that Michael alluded to earlier in the day was sending out phenomenal meeting notes. And if you're someone who makes an absolute practice of doing that at every meeting, people who don't need to be there to make the decision will start clearing out, because they realize I'm also going to find out what happens. I don't need to sit in the room to hear how that decision got made or to hear what actually happened. And so if you feel like you've got these huge rooms full of people and half of them are sitting there listening, start creating incredible meeting notes. It'll be much easier to ask them hey, could you give this one a miss? It'll be easier with a tighter, smaller group. Okay, so that's what I have to say about logistics. The next topic, creating psychological safety. Okay, so this looks, sounds a little bit touchy-feely, but it's actually grounded in tons of research. So let's take a look at the research. The first thing I want to talk about is a project that Google did. It's called Project Aristotle. And a manager in their people analytics division studied 180 teams all across Google. And his goal was to figure out what makes teams the most successful here, right? And he had all these theories would it be the team of all introverts or all extroverts, or would there be a certain meeting structure or size? Or so he took in all this information and tried to figure out what's happened. And the successful teams turned out to have only 2 shared traits, right? Two makes the most successful teams. And those were conversational turn-taking. And what that means is everyone speaks roughly the same amount. So that isn't we go around the table in a meeting and everyone gets 3 minutes. What that is in your team, in general, everyone gets about the same amount of airtime. People who are more junior might be asking more questions. Some people might have really strong opinions about certain things, but it means in general, you're encouraging people to speak about the same amount. The other trait that made highly successful teams was high social sensitivity. And what this means is the ability to read how other people are feeling based on their tone of voice, their expressions, their other nonverbal cues, and actually even the ability to predict what they might feel in certain situations. Okay, so high social sensitivity is something that we'll return to a little bit later. But if you take those two things together, traits like conversational turn-taking and social sensitivity actually are aspects of what psychologists call psychological safety. And what psychological safety means is when you're in this team or when you're in this group, speaking up means you won't be embarrassed, you won't be rejected, or you won't be punished, pretty much no matter what you bring up. And so think about that as a facilitator, right? As a facilitator of a meeting, if you want to have a really successful team, what it means is that you're responsible for teaching and leading psychological safety. And Google's research indicates that this, more than anything else, is really critical to making a team work. Okay, so let's look at another piece of research. The UCLA Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab in 2008 did this fascinating study that was led by Matthew Lieberman and Naomi Eisenberger. And they actually put people in MRI machines, and they measured their brains during episodes of actual physical pain as well as psychological pain. And in this case, it was the pain of being excluded, which they managed to do with this really clever video game. So here was what their result was. Literally the same region in your brain registers social pain as physical pain. So what that means is if you're the person in a meeting that someone makes fun of, or that someone says something really rude to, that's as if you experienced physical pain in that meeting. Their study also has a bunch of other pieces to it. Something I found fascinating is that the language about pain actually refers to both physical and social pain in as many as 15 languages. So phrases like, I broke my arm and my leg hurts, are similar to, she broke my heart, or he hurt my feelings. And also drugs for social distress and depression also work for chronic pain. And they're starting to find that drugs that work for pain, literally things like aspirin and ibuprofen, also work for social pain. So you can see how closely those are wired together and how important it is to make sure that people in your meetings are not in pain. Okay, so what I derive from this is that the workplace is a highly social system, even for engineers. Okay, so think back to the last time you were humiliated in a meeting, right? The last time someone really lit into you for something that they felt like you did wrong or missed. What happened? How did it feel in your body? How likely were you to speak up the next time, right? Did you feel more enrolled in trying harder, or did you feel kind of stomped on? And how nice would it have been if there had been someone there to speak up for you? Something that I've observed quite often in my career, and which I even have sometimes coaching clients come in and report to me, is something that I would call engineering microaggression. And there are times in a meeting where someone will, say, oh, well, let's use X and such language. And someone in the meeting will say, oh, I don't know how to use that. And the suggesting person will be like, oh, you don't know that? Okay, so that's a microaggression, right? The person on the receiving end of that is feeling terrible. I've heard people say, oh, that's a really dumb idea. Or why would you want to do it that way? And some people just laugh or roll their eyes, but when people are doing those things in meetings, psychological safety is just kind of wasting away. And the people who are on the other end of those comments are experiencing the same pain as if they were getting kicked under the table. And so as a meeting facilitator, and even as a meeting attendee, I want to tell you some things that you can do to make this a lot better. So the first thing you can do, and this is super easy, is you can share the research that I just shared with you with your team, right? So you can talk about, so if we want to be a successful team, the two things we need to do are conversational turn-taking and create psychological safety. And we want to be a successful team, right? And so that's relatively easy. Another thing you can do, and this takes a little bit of practice, but I actually find it really fascinating to be able to do this, is to reframe difficult statements in meetings. And so if you end up in that exchange of like, oh, hey, let's use language XYZ, and someone says, oh, I don't know how to use that, and the same person says, what? You don't know that? You as a meeting facilitator can say, hey, if I were in so-and-so's shoes, that would not feel great to me, right? Like, this is a place where it's okay to sometimes not know things. That doesn't mean being completely incompetent, but it does mean like, it's okay not to know things sometimes. And so if you can stick up for the people in your meetings and actually kind of speak about what you think their experience might be, you're not only creating that psychological safety, but you're creating that emotional awareness, right? That ability to read people's cues, that ability to predict what they say, by making those educated guesses. And I feel like it's important not to say, did that hurt your feelings, right? Because you're not trying to put someone on the spot and make it about them. It's really about like, that's not great behavior. We kind of don't do that. So that's reframing difficult statements and speaking for people who might not feel safe saying so in public. It's also great as a meeting leader or even a participant to say, it's okay to not know things, as long as you're willing to learn. A great thing that you can do systemically is include teaching or mentoring in your career ladder so that it's really clear teaching people things that they don't already know is not just something we do here, it's a skill we really value and promote people for. And finally, and this is honestly one of the hardest, is to model not knowing yourself. So if you as a leader or a participant in a meeting are confused or not following or you don't know something, if you put up your hand and say, hey, I'm not sure where we're going with this, or can you explain that more thoroughly, I don't understand, what you're modeling is that it's okay to not know, right? You're the big leader now. And as a leader, you actually have something that I would call a magic manager shield, right? You may not know this yet if you're a relatively new leader, but you can get away with some things. You can be setting social norms in a way that the people on your team might feel like they have a harder time doing. And so use that manager magic to set the social norms that you want to have in your team. Honestly, the social norms that will help your team succeed. So I can talk about psychological safety for a long time because I think it's super interesting. But we're going to move on to something that's actually super easy to do and yields incredible results. So how many of you have sat through a really boring meeting wishing for it to be over, right? Like, totally, I know I have. If you, as a leader, make a regular practice of asking in just the last 2 minutes of the meeting, how could this meeting have gone better? What could I have done better as a facilitator? How could it have been organized better? You get a twofold benefit, right? You, as a facilitator and a leader, are going to get great feedback, right? Feedback is a terrific way to improve, so you'll improve yourself. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to tweak everyone's psychology a little bit. So as they're sitting through the next meeting that they're in with you, they're going to realize, I'm going to be asked at the end to give feedback. And so instead of sitting there going, grumble, 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 I wish I could use my cell phone, they're actually going to be thinking like, oh, I think I'll tell her at the end that we should have done this in a different order, or we should have talked about this before that, or whatever. So it's just this like incredible fast hack that you can use to both get better as a facilitator and to just make your meetings go better. And I'm going to add a fourth thing, and I feel strongly about this too. And this is that you just have no idea the depth of the struggles of the people on your team, right? I have the incredible honor of talking to a lot of leaders on a very regular basis. And I'm always stunned by the number of people who are going through a divorce, struggling with a sick parent, struggling with their kids, having a difficult time with a health challenge, trying to find a place to live. And sometimes people will share that with you as a manager, right? Sometimes they'll open up in their one-on-one and actually talk about the struggles in their life. A lot of times they won't, right? So anytime you're leading a meeting and someone makes a mistake or something doesn't go the way you want, you can do people an incredible service by just being extraordinarily, unfailingly kind, even in the face of people like not doing it quite right. And it will have a huge impact on the people around you. And if that is not kind of enough motivation, kindness and generosity have been linked to greater life satisfaction, stronger relationships, better mental and physical health, and generous people even live longer. So to steal the words of Michael Lopp, be unfailingly kind. If you want any of the research or information, this is all on my blog at Startup Happiness. And I want you to imagine running a meeting about a year from now, September of 2017. You've been planning for success and really focusing on the successful outcomes that you want. You've managed to create quite a bit of psychological safety, right? It doesn't actually take too long to do this in your meetings. You've been asking for regular feedback on your facilitation. You're getting better and better at it, and your team's really helping you. I'm guessing you're running one of the more successful teams at your company, and even getting invited to mentor other people in leading meetings. So I want to leave you with these tips, and I'm super excited for you guys to go out and lead some really fantastic meetings. Thanks so much.